the Museum of Curiosity. Each week I play the theme tune in a slightly different way. This week it's the turn of the implausible pitch change.
Hello, my name's John Lloyd, and I'm the Professor of Ignorance at the University of Buckingham. With me, as ever, is the museum's first and most prized acquisition, donated by an anonymous millionaire and lovingly restored. He is, of course, the museum's curator, Mr. Bill Bailey.
Hello, yes, and I'm also responsible for the museum's musical needs. The grand entrance hall, the gallery of mystifying concepts, and, of course, the lifts.
Now, the Museum of Curiosity's mission statement is nothing if not ambitious. In fact, it barely leaves enough room on the museum's headed notepaper to write anything underneath. And the building is huge. The official guide map, when folded out, is so large that you need another, smaller map to find your way around it. Nothing deserves a place in this museum unless it forces you to rub your eyes, scratch your head, or at least go, hello, and sniff suspiciously.
Unfortunately, so far, the place is practically empty. The only part of the museum that's actually delivering on its promise is in here. The Chamber of Spectacular Echoes.
Yes, that's why each week we invite 3 members of the museum's august steering committee to drop in and suggest new exhibits to liven the place up a bit. This week we're delighted to welcome geologist and paleontologist Dr. Richard Fortey, mountaineer and movie star Brian Blessed, and failed goat herd Sean Locke. Well, now, before we unwrap their exciting parcels, let's hack our way through their densely luxuriant CVs. Sean Locke started his working life on building sites, where he was for 7 years a precast structural erector. He has since taken TV by storm with his comedy talk show, TV Heaven, Telly Hell, his brilliant sitcom, 15 Stories High, and his seminal remark, a bit of advice, never read a pop-up book about giraffes. Sean, what exactly is a precast structural erector?
I just said it because it sounded like I had some kind of skill. Basically, I was a labourer. If you said, oh no, I'm a precast structural erector, you could stay on the dole longer. Until they'd found a suitable position.
Was there a lot
That's why I was a goat herd for a while.
Where was your goat herding taking place? Were you a lonely goat herd, perhaps?
I was in France. It was a region of France, right in the centre of France, a place called Cruz. And there was this French hippie who ran a farm there, and I stayed there for about 3 months. And he didn't pay you anything, but he used to grow lots and lots of cannabis. And he had a barrel of wine, and you just take the goats, you'd milk the goats in the morning and take them out to the forest all day. Off your tits. The most amusing thing about it was, especially relaxing and peaceful, it was actually really stressful. It's more stressful than being a city trader. Because what happened is I'd fall asleep, wake up, there'd be no goats. And I'd be tearing around this forest, trying to finally get 1 goat, 2 goats, 3 goats. I'd be absolutely stressed, the eyeballs, by the time I got back with 26 goats. It was, in the end, my heart couldn't take it. I thought I'd go for a quieter life. But I've got it on my CV. I genuinely was a goat herder. I can do a French goat herd's call. But no, I won't if you don't want me to.
Do you want him to do it, ladies and gentlemen? I thought so.
Well, I haven't done it for a long time. I just want to warn you, a lot of goats might come in. And they'll be French. OK. Biquette. That's it.
Is that it?
Yeah. Biquette. That's French for goat, biquette.
And what
That's all they taught me.
What was that? What was that bit at the beginning? French for fly, my beauties, fly!
Yeah, right. Deeper into the forest. But I went a bit mad. I used to walk around the forest telling jokes to myself.
What drew you from goats to comedy? Was that you went slightly mad? Was that what happened?
I don't know. Obviously I wanted some more than my fair share of attention.
Brian, a lot of actors are funny in private. Do you ever fancy being a stand-up comic?
Oh, no. I do one-man shows now and again, but no. I mean, but it would just be interesting doing your call. I'd finished a film called Tarzan a while ago, and I was leaving the studio, and the Tarzan was in there, and he couldn't do the yodel. I mean, And so I said, well, actually, we did it as kids. I think I can do it for you if you like. And I don't know if I can do it now.
But I've never been that close to the Tarzan call. It's fantastic, terrifying. My theory on Tarzan was that he only could do that, make that ridiculous noise, because he knew there was no other people about. But if someone had come round the corner, he'd have gone, oh,
Ladies and gentlemen, Sean Locke. The world-renowned paleontologist Richard Fortey is a Fellow of the Royal Society, the current President of the Geological Society, and author of 6 hugely popular books. His latest, Dry Storeroom No. 1, is a behind-the-scenes look at the Natural History Museum, where for over 30 years he was their trilobite man.
Well, we tend to be identified with what we do.
Right.
So you can be butterfly woman or trilobite man.
It sounds like a league of superheroes.
Is it a nautilus? Is it a woodlouse? No.
It's trilobite man.
Yes.
Well, my mission, I guess, was to make trilobites as well known to people as dinosaurs, because they were around on Earth for 250 million years, which is actually far longer than the dinosaurs.
How many kinds of trilobite are there? I mean, are there just a few samples?
Oh, good Lord, no. I've named more than 200 species myself. There are probably 5,000.
200 species?
Yes, yeah. I've been out in the field all over the world, breaking these things out of their rocky tombs. And of course, there's no thrill like seeing something that nobody has ever seen before.
You've brought one in that little bag there. There's actually one here.
Yeah,
and it is the most beautiful thing. Well, just for people who can't obviously hear the trilobite, just to describe it, it's about 3/4 of an inch across. It looks rather like a blackcurrant cough pastel.
It looks like something you'd have around a pendant at Glastonbury, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Well, you're dead right. They're sold as pendants in Glastonbury.
Are they?
That was a brilliant guess. Well, now, Richard, one of your roles is being president of the Geological Society, which is quite a big job. You've had some pretty famous people have been your predecessors there.
Probably the most famous one is Thomas Henry Huxley, who defended Darwin when he was under attack for the idea of evolution. Later on, William Buckland, who was president, tried to eat every member of the animal kingdom. And he was allegedly even at a famous person's heart, I believe, at one stage.
Louis XIV, wasn't it?
Allegedly, yes.
Augustus Hare, a famous raconteur, well, I've never heard of him, but he said that apparently William Buckland said, talk of strange relics led to mention of the heart of a French king preserved at Nuneham in a silver casket. Dr. Buckland, whilst looking at it, exclaimed, I have eaten many strange things, but I have never eaten the heart of a king. And before anyone could hinder him, he'd gobbled it up. And the precious relic was lost forever. Sounds like a liability, this bloke.
Ladies and gentlemen, Richard Fortey. Finally, Brian Blessed is a great tearing blizzard of a man, actor, adventurer, and sometime opera singer. He has penetrated to the heart of the Venezuelan jungle, made 3 attempts on Mount Everest, and holds the record for being the oldest man to trek all the way to the magnetic North Pole. He's a 3rd Dan judo black belt. He made coffins for a living.
Yes, I did,
And you're a paratrooper, Brian, once, weren't you?
Yes, there's no end to my talents. No. I mean, I was, thank God I'm modest. I was in the parachute command. I did 76 jumps, and one day we missed the fields and we hit all the concrete. Lots of guys broke their legs and backs and God knows what. And I broke my right foot very badly. So it's always been very badly deformed. But I mean, it doesn't stop me getting up the mountains.
It's huge.
It's huge.
I've just got this magnificent image of you doing the Tarzan call as you leap out of the plane.
Jeez, Geronimo.
Oh, I'd love to have seen that.
I read somewhere that you had a bit of a childhood obsession with Arthur Conan Doyle's Lost World.
Well, I mean, when I was a kid, the radio was fantastic. And they did the Lost World brilliant. I always said to my gang in Goldthorpe near Doncaster, we've got to go. We've got to go to the Lost World. We've got to go and climb Roraima. We've got to go and do it like Professor Challenger. They said to me, isn't it dangerous going to... Sorry, listeners. Isn't it dangerous going to Mount Everest? Is it dangerous? The biggest danger in life is not taking the adventure. You've got to go for it. Follow your dreams. And don't let the bastards grind you down.
It's very funny. When I first met Brian was the first series of Blackadder. Do you remember that, Brian? And Brian had to ride a horse, and this enormous bloody horse turned up. And Brian got on this thing in his huge suit of armour, and the horse bolted. It took fright, and it shot off and disappeared over the horizon. We didn't know what to do, because in the middle of a Northumbrian moor, and short of getting a helicopter, there was no way of... he didn't have a radio or anything. And he disappeared, and he was gone for half an hour. And eventually there was this kind of amazing cantering of hooves. We all looked behind, and he came up the hill behind us. And he's covered in sweat in this armour, and so was the horse. They were both foaming at the mouth. And Brian said, yeah, she was a bit frisky, took her for a spin. Ladies and gentlemen, Brian Blessed. The happy days. And now to the pleasant matter of relieving our distinguished advisory panel of their gifts to the museum. Mr. Curator.
Yes, thank you, Professor. The museum is now ready for donations. So, Professor Forty, what have you got for us?
Well, what I want is to put in some of the best bits from the Natural History Museum.
Ah.
For example, when I was doing fieldwork in China many years ago, I got bitten by the most enormous hornet. And for 2 days, this sounds almost like a Brian Blessed story, I was lying with a very, very high temperature, covered in green seaweed, which was a traditional Chinese medicine. And eventually I recovered, and eventually I got home, and I went to see, of course, Hornet Man in the museum.
And, there really was a Hornet Man.
Hornet Man. Well, actually, he was Bee Man, but he doubled as Hornet Man.
Did he have a stripy sweater?
Yes, as a matter of fact, he did, but he smoked a pipe, which wasn't very bee-like. So I said to him, what was I stung by? And he said, good Lord, Richard, he said, you've been stung by the giant hornet of Changshan. Why didn't you bring it back?
Perhaps I don't want to ask you this, but where did it actually sting you?
In the side. It had crawled up inside my jacket, and then from its burrow...
So it was nicking your wallet as well.
So the giant hornet of Changshan should definitely go into this museum.
That's a definite.
Now I want to put in a curator, since this is about curation.
Hang on.
And this... This curator worked on plants. He worked up in the herbarium. His name was Wellnam. And he demonstrates the point that once a curator, always a curator. He did work on, rather appropriately, a type of plant called madder. But he was also a tremendous womanizer. And when he...
Is that one of the perks of curating?
When he retired, curators are there to label and organise and make sure the collections are available and catalogued and so on. When he retired, they came across a little square box. And inside the box, there were a whole lot of little cards. And on every card was a little sprig of pubic hair. And they were all curated by... Dare I go on?
There'll now be some music on Radio 4. Those listeners of a sensitive disposition, turn off your sets now.
All I will say is that hair colour and the alphabets were involved. So that was...
What was his nickname?
Plucky.
I guess.
Perhaps you could verify this, that there was a star appointment paleontologist who wrote nothing in his whole career at the museum, who collected and catalogued all the string from the parcels of fossils sent to him, graded according to length, including string too short to be of any use. Is that the sort of level of personnel you're dealing with?
Yes, this man, Leslie Bairstow, was our most famous idler. It's just that he was such a perfectionist.
Yeah.
He could never bring himself to write anything down in the way of a definitive scientific paper. So he was working on rocks in Yorkshire, and he catalogued them ever finer, but it was never fine enough. When he eventually retired, he decided he had to do not just the rocks in the cliffs of Yorkshire, but under the water, so he trained himself to become a diver. But this was in the days when diving suits were made of lead, you know, with great big goldfish bowls on the head. Unfortunately, he was also very secretive, so he used to work at night. And once he got stuck in his diving suit in the museum and had to walk out onto Knightsbridge to try and persuade a passer-by to let him out.
That sounds like a great start to an episode of Casualty.
So we've got a great collection there. We've got a giant bee and some kind of grotesque pubic magpie.
And they're all in. There we go.
I'd like to turn to you, Brian. What would you like to add to our collection?
Well, I'd like to add to the collection the Yeti. Of course, in Canada, it has the name Sasquatch Bigfoot. In Russia, it's called the Almas giant. All over Asia, the Meter Marsukpa. I'd recently come back from Mongolia, and I rode for about 20 days at one point with the Mongols, who ride wonderfully, as you know. And I said, tell me, when we were deep in Mongolia, about Yeti, Almas giant. And they said, well, the Almas, Brian, we see in the early spring, and we see them in late autumn. And we see them, several hundred of them. They have wolves with them. They're very big, hairy men, women between 8 and 9 feet high. We never interfere with them. We don't get too near to them, but they move across northern Mongolia towards Siberia, spring and autumn. So we're talking about vast areas. I have to say that when I was first on Everest, and the Sherpas all said to me, you know, Brian, my father, he shot a Yeti when I was a little boy. He brought it into the village. I said, what did it look like? He said, it looked like you. So I think that in the early days, a lot of Westerners were shocked at the turn of the last century. Because the Tibetans can't grow beards and things like that. So you get our early explorers going in the wilderness on their own or in twos and getting long beards and then appearing in the villages dark at night with no lights. And then the flames are gone and their dogs would come out and there's a Yeti and they would shoot it. So they'd actually shot a Westerner. But let me just say this. Hold on, John. I know, love. Hold on, me, oh, lovely. There is certainly a very strong case for them. I mean, I get messages from Russians deep in Siberia. Hello, Brian, we want you to get here quickly. We only want you, we trust you because you'll protect it. But we are only 10 meters away from an Almas giant. We're looking at it. It is very interesting that Gorbachev, when he was in power, mounted a £25 million expedition to the Almas Mountains. He went there because the people on the periphery complained that their women and children were being abducted by the Almas giants. Now, take the most flat-footed mountaineer we've ever had, Don Willems. About 20 years ago, News at 10 recorded every evening live. We're going to the British expedition approaching the south face of Annapurna. News at 10 said to him, well, Don, what does the face look like? He said, what's the bloody face look like? He said, I don't know. I've not been looking at it. There's been a man 9 feet tall walking around my tent for days. Dome-shaped head, black face, green eyes, covered in hair, a great big giant walking around my tent. That was recorded live. It obviously does exist. I mean, top explorers and top scientists at the moment are recording their whereabouts. We'll have to protect them, but I feel it's a pointer to something that we've forgotten. It is there in us, the primitive. And I feel, therefore, the Yeti somehow relates to us. We can't become too mechanized. We've got to sweat. We've got to shag. We've got to shit. We've got to pee. We've got to be wild. We've got to live again. I get terrible wind.
I love the actual name Yeti. It derives from the Tibetan language Yete, which means that thing there.
Can I just say one thing? I think what the main thing is that it's probably better that it exists in your imagination than in reality. And if it did exist in reality, the worst thing you could do is possibly to find it. Because in about 5 years' time, it'll be moonwalking and a mobile phone commercial, wasn't it?
There must be some more to secrecy.
I think that
Have no chance, would it?
you could summarise by saying we've been looking for it for years, but we haven't found it yet.
And I was going to say, by the way, my old son, you need Brian Blessed to find it so the bastards won't hurt it. That's why they want me to find it. Because some bugger's going to find it and then it's going to be hell. And a big caring guy like me can make sure he's protected. Because I am president of the national parks and I want the bastard looked after.
It's a controversial subject, Brian. It's a very interesting idea, but as we don't have a Yeti available.
Yes. Well, it's me.
I'm afraid you will have to stand in for the Yeti.
Right,
We'll make you a nice little room. So that's Bigfoot Brian Blessed in the Yeti enclosure.
There you go.
Right. So, finally, I'd like to come to you. Sean, may we have your submission, please?
Yeah, I've got it here with me.
What is it?
It's a scarf.
Yes, you're holding up a scarf.
It's the modern scarf knot. Basically, you know, it's that knot where you fold the scarf in half, wrap it around your neck, and then you go through the loop. It's just that it's revolutionised scarf wearing for millions. It's completely changed the whole experience, hasn't it? And other people agree with me. Would they agree? Very good. Would you also agree that this only started happening 4 or 5 years ago? And I was baffled. I was flummoxed. I said, hold on a sec. People have had scarves for, imagine, this century, and suddenly it's just been made much easier. Everything's changed. Wearing a scarf's fine. It's a pleasure. I look forward to putting my scarf on now. I'll put my scarf on. Sometimes I take my coat off, my jumper, leave the scarf on. It's so comfy. And the scarf is suddenly much easier to wear. Looks great. It's comfortable, it's easy. It does pose a strangulation risk, but people who wear scarves don't get into a lot of conflict, I feel. So it's just completely changed it. So there's somebody discovered this new knot, and it was woof, it spread.
So basically, what you've tied is a half hitch, because I know that because I had a boat for 3 years, and we used to do the mooring with a half hitch. Now that is just a half hitch, isn't it? Surely.
Well, no, it's not, because it's not attached to a boat.
Is that the definition of a knot, then? If it's
that would make scarf wearing very uncomfortable and difficult if I had to drag a boat round with me. So, you know when you go away on holiday, for a long holiday, like 3 weeks, you come back, you notice a certain new phenomena that you wouldn't have noticed so much if you'd stayed at home. Like, I remember going away, I came back, there was 2 new things. There was Sudoku had appeared, and the other thing was happy slapping. That had arrived. So I go away, and there's these 2 completely new phenomena, and they're everywhere. That's what interested me about it, was the spread of it, and also the fact that who's invented this new way of doing scarves? It seems so simple.
Does this strike you as anything to do with morphic resonance? This is the idea that animals somehow, crows in Japan learn to crush walnuts under car tyres, and then suddenly crows on the other side of the world have learned the same thing.
I've heard that story. My favourite version is the sheep on the cattle grids in Australia, and you know how big Australia's big. Don't need to say that, do I? But it is. And from one side to the other, sheep learnt to lie down, and roll over the cattle grids. I know, it must be hilarious to see, but it's true. And they were said within days, on the other side of Australia, sheep were doing the same thing. Now, there's no way sheep can whisper that fast across Australia.
OK, but here's another really interesting fact that we've got here, that ranchers in the far west of the USA don't bother to build cattle grids anymore. What they do is they paint a cattle grid on the road, and cattle won't go over them, even cattle that have never seen a cattle grid before. Now, explain that.
Yeah.
Or do you think it's just hearsay?
Well, I suspect that those cattle must be seeing what their parents do, and as they grow up, following the same example, if it's true, which I rather doubt.
I think what he's getting at is a meme theory, the idea that ideas
What's a
spread...
meme? Sorry, John, what's a meme?
A meme?
The idea is that ideas, as it were, have a life of their own in human beings, so they can be passed around the world from culture to culture.
So it's a currency of ideas.
So your scarf might be an ideal experiment to test the meme theory.
Well, it's too late now, it's everywhere.
Yeah.
Dr. Susan Blackmore's the main meme theorist. And the weird thing is, she's not here, but her idea is. And it got here by Sean, who's probably never even heard of Susan Blackmore. Have you, Sean?
Did she come up with the scarf?
Yeah.
But it's well attested in science, for example, that people often come up with the same idea in different places, don't they? I mean...
Oh, yes. There's a whole theory of knowledge that ideas have their time.
Yes.
So presumably the scarf idea may have reached its moment in human cognizance.
Yeah.
When it was waiting to be born.
Yeah.
We've reached...
And you think of all the amazing things humans have done, you'd think the scarf thing would have been done about 500 years ago, wouldn't it?
No, but
it's weird,
probably
isn't it?
some Egyptian hieroglyph somewhere, if you look at it closely enough, will have your scarf.
Right. So it was an archaeologist, you're saying?
Absolutely.
No, just one other small point I wanted to make was the fact that the person who did this doesn't get or claim any credit.
No, and I think that it should be in the museum because I think it is interesting and it stands for something. And you've called it that funny new knot blokes do with their scarves. But I think it should be named after you, as you're the first person who's noticed the phenomenon, really, in the museum. Don't you agree, Bill?
I wholeheartedly agree.
And I think I think we should call it the Sean Locke neck knot. There we are. That's it. Well, now it's time to take a random shuffle from the museum's suggestion box to find out what the friends of the museum, assembled here today, have come up with to add to our growing collection. A Fabergé hen.
A transcript of Tony Blair's first confessional.
J.R.R. Tolkien's wedding ring.
I love that, yeah. With this ring, where's he gone? Yeah.
And lastly, and certainly strangest, the smell of Thursday. Right, so we'll sift through those and decide what of those goes in. But meanwhile, our kosher exhibits are the funny kind of new knot that blokes do with their scarves, known as the Sean Locke neck knot.
You've got to come up with something better than that, really.
The morphic resonance neck something.
Well, anyway, so that funny new knot that blokes do with their scarves, an assortment of giant hornets and plucky curators from the Natural History Museum, and, of course, the abominable stand-in. My grateful thanks to our splendid steering committee, Sean, Brian and Richard, and there's just time for a final thought from you, please, Mr. Curator.
Yes, thank you, Professor. I'd like to quote from Bertrand Russell. There are two motives for reading a book. One, that you enjoy it. The other, that you can boast about it. And that's actually from the History of Western Philosophy, which I thoroughly recommend.
Well, thank you, and a very good day to you.
The Museum of Curiosity was curated by John Lloyd and Bill Bailey, with research by James Harkin, Xander Cancel and QI. The exhibits were kindly donated by Sean Locke, Brian Blessed and Richard Forty, and the producers of Curiosity were Richard Turner and Dan Schreiber. If you're the curious sort and you'd like to snoop around the museum's exhibits and prod them, please make your way to the Radio 4 website, where you can find out more about the Museum of Curiosity.